you want to
Actually,
go first?
Yes.
Yeah, go.
I'm gonna need total silence from everybody while I read this out, okay?
All right, all
If you
right.
have any questions, just hold on to them till just hold on till the end, okay? Now, I was given Chekhov's gun. Again, it's not a logical law, but let's just talk about it. It has a philosophical value of 0. But let's just talk about it and see what happens, right? You ready?
oh, I could figure out some philosophical things for it, so I'll one up
Oh,
you
well,
there
if you'd written
afterwards.
this, then that would be relevant, yeah.
How
Okay.
dare you interrupt, Barry?
Yeah. Okay. Hold your questions to the end, yeah? Thanks. So here we go. A lot of this stuff, if you're a fan of the podcast, you'll have heard some of this before, but I don't give a shit. Your brain, okay, has evolved into an amazing pattern recognition machine. It is very good at taking data and turning it into information using pattern recognition. It does this with sound and vision and also your thoughts. Your brain is devoting so much time to pattern recognition that sometimes it invents patterns that aren't really there. And you can prove this fairly easily by looking at literally any optical illusion. Okay, Hamlet in that play said, "Do you see yonder cloud that's almost in shape of a camel?" And Polonius, who appears to have been beamed in from a different play completely, says, "By the mass, and 'tis like a camel indeed." And then Hamlet says, "Methinks it is like a weasel." Now, Hamlet is aware that there is not a giant wispy camel or weasel in the sky, but he can see that it looks that way. And the same is true of the patterns created rather than identified in our thoughts. In other words, being fully aware that your pattern recognition machine is misfiring does not prevent it from misfiring. The good news is that we can harness this machine to help us in many ways, and this is how poetry and music kicked off, because poetry and music are based on some fairly basic and repeating patterns, and it makes things easy to remember. The Iliad is over 15,000 lines, which had to be memorized by people who were illiterate, meaning they couldn't check their progress with the text at any point. Man, that thing better rhyme or have repetitious bits somewhere in it or all the way through. A more complicated thing we do is narrative, which means, I'm getting to it, don't worry. A more complicated thing we do is narrative, which means telling a story. We constantly tell each other's story all the time using all the narrative devices. And perhaps the most common narrative device we use to tell each other stories is the metaphor. And metaphor just means referring to something in terms of something else, in the hopes of moving closer to an understanding. For instance, in that last sentence, I said moving closer to an understanding, when in fact there will be no literal movement. This sort of narrative device is so embedded in our most basic communication that you might not even have noticed it was happening just there, which is fine. Good. And another narrative device is Chekhov's gun, which was developed by Russian playwright and short story writer Anton Chekhov. Very simply, it says that if you see a gun in Act 1, then you better be shooting somebody in Act 3. For one thing, when you're putting on a play, everything costs money, and you don't want to waste anyone's time or resources putting extraneous business in there. And the secondary issue is, why have a gun at all if you're not going to use it, right? What's the point? Unless you're running up some Agatha Christie bullshit where it's important to lead your audience to the incorrect conclusion, you want to respect your audience. Now, the problems arise when we apply what we've learned from decades of constantly telling each other's stories, decades of television and movies and books and plays, and we try to apply it to real life. Something inside us expects good people to be rewarded and bad people to be punished, and something inside of us tells us that only a certain kind of person will end up addicted to drugs or kill themselves. This is what happens when you prioritize narratives over reality. Mark Twain once said, the difference between fact and fiction is that fiction has to make sense. Right, we're halfway through. Real life has no narrative. In real life, it would be perfectly possible to see a gun at the start of the evening and have no one shoot anyone by the end of the evening. In real life, things just sort of happen for no discernible reason all the time. Not for no reason, but for no discernible reason all the time. Narrative only happens in your mind, and it is powerful, and we all succumb to it all the time. It is not something that only happens to other people. You cannot avoid it because it's how your brain works. We are all constantly trying to find patterns in the mess of stuff of everything. And if there isn't a pattern, then by Jesus, I will make one. All you can do is be aware of it and hope for the best. Do not confuse the map for the territory. What's going on in the chat? Calm down. Do not confuse the map for the territory. We have lots of maps, ways to model the world, our reality, but we have no access to reality. And maybe we use some of the maps to get a better idea of what the territory might look like. Maybe, I don't know, and you don't either. All we have are the maps. This is what the postmodernists were trying to get at, that there is no objective reality, and it might not even be coherent to imagine reality in terms of whether or not it's objective, for all sorts of reasons. But we have no access to reality, we only have the maps. And again, the fact that all we have are the maps should not confuse you about what the maps are. The mistake Socrates made wasn't going the whole wrong way on that. He thought there must be some base reality somewhere, but all we see are the shadows. But what if there is no base reality anywhere, and all of us has is just the way we look at it? A bee will look at a flower and see something completely different to what I see. Not just because of the different visual systems, but of the different cognitive processes, the different context, and the different operating assumptions. So is one of us wrong? Is one of us closer to seeing the real flower? Are those two questions nonsensical? If we accept that bees see whatever they need to see to do bee stuff, then maybe I see whatever I need to see to do my human stuff. Why not? Some maps are trying to more accurately map the territory, like science or physics, but they are still maps, modeling systems. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong. And if you've ever been on the London Underground, you will realize that maps can be indispensable. In fact, wrong might be a bad way to think about any of this. I can show you a very good map of my town, Clonmel in Ireland. It is in no way wrong, but only an idiot would think it's a town. It's a piece of paper about 1 foot square. How could it be my town? But this is a very common philosophical mistake about how we think, all of us, me, by the way, too, all the time. All you can do is be aware of it and hope for the best. Chekhov's gun. Thanks. We're done.